An anarchist and a fundamental Christian walk into a room to play DND. This is from a few years back, so some of the details are a little foggy. TLDR, lots of political arguments that lead to the enslavement and TPK of the other party, which then lead to a discussion on why we are bad people. Now I live in a small town, so there's only a few dozen people extremely interested in roleplay and most are in groups or in campaigns already. However, because of the small town there aren't too many to choose from. I saw a posting in a game shop for a D&D game that's starting up. I was tired of Ming and decided to give it a shot. I joined the DM's created Facebook group where he posted information on his campaign. It was a low magic gritty fantasy setting. We had a few requirements. We had to post a 5-paragraph description of our character and their story. He said his campaign was going to be roleplay heavy and didn't want character with nothing but a name and class. I was personally fine with this as I'm a huge roller player and usually write stupid long biography on my D&D characters. We were able to make requests on Ming style. For example, he asked about sexual themes and violence, on whether we're okay with either. I wasn't interested in any sexual themes, so I asked that he not place any in his campaign. He agreed and we moved on. During this cooperative writing session the question of alignment came up. The DM and a player started to get into a Facebook debate on what it means to be good and bad 48 posts later, and their argument was going into circles. I had decided to send the DM a message saying he needed to chill out, and their discussion was going nowhere. The player was booted from the group and the DM never realized that his toxic behavior was the cause of the argument. He even afterwards would mention the player and equating them to bad people. This red flag I ignored as I was too excited to finally play on the other side of the DM screen. So after the stories of our characters were written, this was the party. DM A Ranger, DM's friend A Sorcerer, the Anarchist A Rogue, the Anarchist girlfriend A Paladin, myself A Fighter, my friend. We were the A team of the Village Guard. The squad who dealt with the problems the Village Guard couldn't. We fought some orcs and some zombies and things were fine. His descriptions were solid and his tactics were good as well. However, as we live in a cold climate area, so it takes a while for our vehicles to warm up till they're able to drive. While our cars warmed, the Sorcerer and the DM started to talk about random items of interest, but after a couple of sessions the talk of politics came up. That went as well as you imagine. Neither were willing to see each other's point of view and dismissed each other, and slowly their discussions became just a bit more toxic. Something I would always alleviate by switching subjects and the use of humor. Sadly, that also seeped into the game. The Sorcerer became far more edgy and more murder hobo, and the orcs were becoming far more rappy. I had to remind him 5 times that I wasn't interested in any sexual themes in the game. 4 times with the orcs, and once with a tavern controlled by succubus and incubus. Finally, the first arc of the campaign came to a close. The orc army stormed our gates and we repelled their horde of minions barely. Now we had hundreds of orcish steel weapons and our village didn't have much use. So we hitched a cart and traveled to a local city, hoping on selling this armory for a solid price. Sadly, my little brother was sick and I couldn't make it. My friend was going to China for vacation and we were usually the mediators. The group decided to play without us as it was just a simple city mission. A pile of dead guards and the party in prison is what me and my friend came back to. Apparently a dirty guard tried to grope the rogue and the Sorcerer burned him to death. This came to a huge fight and everyone was in prison for mass murder. Me and Fighter were not detained as of yet as we were grabbing some supplies during that time. However, once we asked the guards what happened to the 3 people, we were also arrested. In comes the leader of the city. Archmage, what happened to low magic? Who declares we are villains and we will be punished. He places irremovable and very power bracelets that allows him to see through our senses and to cast spells through them. Low magic, we are too valuable to kill. Oh no, we will work off our crime by completing tasks for this mage. First we will kill the source of the undead to the north. We were already planning on doing this. We accept as we had no choice and head north to go kill undead. We found 3 magic items during this adventure, our first, all of which were of course cursed. A cursed splint mail that's powered by the soul of the crying child, can't take off, you can burn the child for a free casting of bless. I sadly had put this armor on and never used. Bless as my character was lawful good as fudge. A crown that possessed you. Ranger is now possessed by a rolled king. A sword that leads you to the crown. Greater than sign, greater than sign. We kill the stuff. 2 of us are now cursed. We are forced back to the city. The Archmage forces us to meet him at a cove, where he has a ship ready. We will now have to wipe out a village of savages. My character is lawful good as fudge. Ain't going to do that without good reason. And with the permission of the party I decided to Leroy Jenkins the mage and get disintegrated. And the party got toasted shortly afterwards, but the rogue, no, he spare her as he was going to use her as a pet. The session and campaign ends, and he explains that if we had just gone with his plans everything would be fine. But I had to ruin everyone's fun. And that my character is going to hell because he attacked an innocent. Just like sorcerer who will burn for all time. And then the argument transitioned to politics and the players noped the fudge out of there. Thankfully I was finally able to play as a player in a much better group afterwards. And actually about to finish my Celestial Warlock story at level 11, the longest running campaign I've ever done. Hope the story made sense. My memory was hazy as now I'm trying to forget that experience, to be honest. Drow Ranger murders party over temporary loss of weapon and Alchohol. We've all got a guy who power games. I used to have a guy like that. At one point he literally said during character creation, I always need to be the most powerful combatant in the party because everyone else always turns on me. Now I thought, if this is a trend across multiple parties of entirely different people, and you're the only common element. But I digress. Last year I was running a 5e campaign and this player rolled up a chaotic neutral Drow Ranger. Amongst a good party chaotic good barbarian, cleric and wizard. So, as the resident edgelord, he kept blowing his money on drugs and alcohol and poisons. Which, given that he also was dragging his illegitimate daughter around as a follower, the rest of the party didn't approve of. We ended up in a situation where the cleric used the spell Purify Food and Drink to turn his vodka into potato juice. As a prank, the Drow's reaction was to whip out his heavy crossbow and threaten to kill the cleric if she didn't change the liquor back. The cleric, who was standing right up close to him, explained that it couldn't be undone. The wizard, standing about 30 feet away, saw this and turned the wooden body and stock of the crossbow into clay using minor alchemy, ruining the weapon temporarily. To try and defuse the situation, the Drow's response was to turn to the cleric standing next to him and stab her in the chest, putting her into death saves. Now, the party was, unbeknownst to them, deep in bandit territory, so I figured that it might be better to have some bandits ambush them now, to focus them on fighting a common foe, so they could cool off. Totally failed. The barbarian ended up soloing the entire bandit crew, while the Drow starts yelling at the wizard to fix his crossbow, or he'll execute the cleric, while she's bleeding out. Meanwhile the wizard is pleading with him to let him get close enough to stabilize her with a touch spell. The argument was still going, and the cleric still bleeding, by the time the barbarian got back. At this point I stepped back and I said, guys, I don't care if you mix alignments and personalities, but you need an interactor reason not to be fighting, because I'm not going to deal with this. It's not worth the hassle. The Drow player then tried to convince me that his actions were justified by saying that if he grabbed my laptop and smashed it, I'd physically attack him. He was a bit surprised when I told him that no, I'd demand he buy me a new laptop and or repairs. I think I learned a lot about the guy that day, and I'm glad to say I don't play with him anymore.